You're listening to the Gender Reveal Party podcast. I'm your host, Jay Pryor. This isn't your usual gender reveal party. There will be no baby sex parts. This is the real reveal, where we reveal gender through stories of brave humans willing to share their lived experience. Enjoy the listening. I sure enjoy making it. Hey, welcome back to the Gender Reveal Party podcast. As always, I'm Jay Pryor, your host. And I am really, I hate it when people say I'm excited, because I'm not really excited. I am glad and I am delighted that it's coming from you. Let me say this. I think this information is so important to get out. So I'm here with Reverend Rachel Cornwell, who is a friend of mine and the author of this book. I'm going to put it in front of my face, Daring Adventures, Helping Gender Diverse Kids and Their Families Turn Around and Thrive. And so it's so interesting to me. First of all, I want to share that I have been in the business of having parents, and now it's grandparents, interestingly enough, contacting me because their children are coming out as trans for eons, right? And there's some books that I always refer people to, but by now they're not up to date, right? They're not speaking the same language that people are speaking today. They're pretty old, the books that I know to refer people to, right? And so I'm so happy that I have this book now to refer to, because just last week I'm having grandparents. I have 3 grandparents that are friends of mine that have trans kids that have come out. And so this book, y'all, if you know anybody just everybody should read it. But what I love about it too is just the specificity of it. So we'll get into that. But I want to welcome you. Thanks for being on the podcast. Thanks for writing the book. Thanks for being a stand for our people, which we'll get into in a minute. And yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay. I'm really excited I am delighted and grateful that
Grateful is a good word. Thank you.
Made this space for me to come and talk about this subject, that I'm so passionate about. That's really become a part of my ministry now, because I am blessed and gifted to have 3 wonderful children, the youngest of whom is transgender. And Evan he's 11 years old now. He transitioned when he was in 1st grade, when he was 5. And we're really fortunate because our kiddo knew who he was at a very young age and was able to tell us in his own way. And we were able to hear that he was exploring his gender, that he was not a girl as we had thought, but a boy. He also used theological language to talk about his understanding of himself. I remember one specific conversation where I asked him if he was sad that he was born a girl, because I couldn't quite understand what the emotion was that was attached to it. And he said, "Yes, Mommy, I told God when I was a star in the sky that I was a boy, but God made me a girl. And now I just have to live with it." And I don't know where this response came from, but
and how old was he then?
5.
5, yeah.
Yeah, in kindergarten. And I said, "Baby, your body is only one part of you. And I don't believe that God makes mistakes. I believe that God made you on purpose the way you are. And that there are people in the world who are girls who were born boys and boys who were born girls," was the language that I used at the time. It's not what I would say now, but when I was talking to my 5-year-old,
sure. Yeah, because we have to find the words, sense. Right?
And I said, "Those people are transgender, and maybe that's what you are." And he said, "Mommy, that's not true. That those people don't exist." And I realized that he had no context.
Right.
I knew you were probably the first out trans person I ever met, Jay.
Yeah.
And so I had people in my life who had shown me that transgender was a way to live.
Hmm.
But he did not. And so I thought, okay, so I need to show him that this is a possibility. Um, and, started showing him examples of trans people living in the world, thriving. One of the first people that I showed him was Skylar Baylor, who is the first out trans NCAA athlete to compete in a Division I school as a swimmer. And Skylar transitioned from female to male and swam for Harvard, and now is an educator. And there was a wonderful video about his story that talked about his whole transition. And my son is an athlete and a swimmer, and so that was like something he could really relate to. So we're just trying to find people to point him to show him that this was a possibility, and not
Right.
to say this is who you are. But if this is who you are, then there are people that you can look to as examples.
Right. Because I didn't have that, right? I didn't have anybody who was, even though I had stuff going on at that age, I was
Mm,
just sharing with somebody recently because I've always had this memory, but it was a memory that was like, these weird memories you have that you don't quite connect it to everything until recently. I remember I used to have these training pants, right? That's back in the 60s. They didn't use diapers, right? I had these training pants that had plastic pants over them. But the
mm,
training pants were thick, white, much like boy tidy whitey pants,
right.
right? And I
Yeah.
remember when my mom moved me out of those into girls' underwear, and
Mm,
how like it was like a freak out for me. I was like, what is happening? You're taking away my underwear. And I
yeah.
remember that feeling of like, wait a minute, these aren't my underwear, right? Those are my underwear. And I remember going back to the basket and getting those out and putting
Hmm.
them on. And then but I didn't connect that until recently. I was like, oh yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that now. And
Right.
like it was just a weird feeling. I've always hated girls' underwear. It's so uncomfortable.
It is. It is.
It's really
Well,
uncomfortable.
and Evan refused to wear a girl's bathing suit
Yeah,
at the age of 3.
yeah,
He said, "No, I'm going to wear shorts and a t-shirt. I don't want to wear that." Which was so interesting to
yeah,
me. And at first we thought it was just clothes and hair, and I don't fight about those things. Like, if it fits and it's appropriate for the weather, I don't, do what you want to do. But when he started talking about, when I grow up, I'm going to be a man and I'm going to cut my breasts off, I thought, oh, this is deeper. There's
yeah,
something here.
yeah.
And so we've been very fortunate. Our kiddo was very clear with us. We had a lot of support. He transitioned socially in 6th grade, or in when he was 6 in 1st grade. And so, um, we've been very public about our experience too, because I felt, as a pastor, as a Christian, as a mom, it was really important for me to share our story and our story of acceptance of our child and what we were learning. Um, and so then I had people coming to me, much like you, of like, oh, I have a friend whose child is transgender or exploring their gender, and they want to be supported, but they don't know how, right? As
Exactly.
a
And I get that all the time. Like they want to be supported, but they don't know how. Those are the best, those are the exact words that come out of their
Yeah.
mouth.
So
So
that's the audience I really wanted to write for, was
yeah,
heterosexual cisgender parents like myself who want to support their kids but really don't even know where to start.
yeah,
And just to provide here are some things you should think about. Here are some questions that will come up for you. And I didn't want to. Well, I just wanted to have a resource to hand to people, because I had so many people coming to
yeah.
me, and I thought,
So
oh,
me
I'll
too.
just write
That's
a
what I'm
book.
saying. I'm so delighted that I have, so grateful I have something to go here. Read this book.
But I also realized that our experience is not, it's not normative.
Right.
And there are a lot of different experiences out there with kids coming to this awareness at different ages or in different ways or with more distress.
Hmm.
So I interviewed about 20 families for the book,
Yep.
and live in different parts of the country. Their kids are different ages and different identities, and really tried to pull out some of the common themes
Yep.
around that. So.
Yeah, and one of the things that how do you address, and maybe you can share this if you address it in the book or how you address it in the book. Uh, there are certain things that I try to get parents and grandparents to understand that you can have those concerns and thoughts and questions, but don't bring those to the trans person,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Because that's the that's them working out their stuff, right? and it's not ours. And that's hard for people because they're almost, well, what about this? What about this? And what about this? But boy, does that that's not affirming, right, to us. Do you talk about that? Do you share about that or how that goes awry? Or do you, and I try to teach it to them about what you focus on gets bigger. If you want to have a relationship with this child, focus on what's working and the love and the connection and
Yeah.
let them follow their guide, no matter even if it doesn't vibe with your what you think your values are. It's not your body, like all of that. But boy, when they're this age, especially, I have them coming out at 5. And these
Yeah.
grandparents are like, how are they knowing that old? And I'm like, I was digging out my underwear when I was 3. I'm gonna have those are my underwear. Those are my boy underwear. Right. When I
Yeah.
was 3, that's how early we know. Right. But how do you I want to shut up and do you address that in your book?
Well, I say over and over again that parents are on their own journey, that this is the whole family transitions is one of the chapters, right?
Right. Yep.
And when if you have other children in the home, if you have two parents at least, right? I mean, if you have an extended family network, you have a whole lot of people who are also transitioning in this journey. And so I say over and over again that parents need to express unconditional love for their child.
Yes.
They need to listen and learn from our kids because
Yes.
they are telling us who they are. And then we need to do our own work. We need to find our own support groups.
Right.
And that's why this book is really for parents. Like, I
For
hear you. This
parents.
is hard. There's
It's
grief,
hard. And
there's
I have a kid
anxiety.
that's trans. It's hard for me. It was hard for me. It was not, I mean, and I just not like I'm special, but as a trans person, you'd think, well, that would go a lot easier for you. No, it does not. It's still your kid, you
Still
know?
your kid. And you as a trans person know you have some of the worries, right?
Yeah.
About their safety, about their well-being. You know the statistics, right?
Yeah.
Of kids who transgender and non-binary kids who don't have support from their families and
Yes.
how detrimental that is to their well-being.
Right.
And so, there's a lot of fear, anxiety, grief, all normal stuff that we have as parents and that gets layered on when your kid is going through something that you haven't experienced yourself. And so I could just keep telling parents, this is a journey, listen and learn, educate yourself, express unconditional support and love. I think what's hard for parents is that, we think we have this responsibility to form our children, to shape them in a certain way. But they come to us as they are. And I have 3 kids and they're all totally different people.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like my husband and I have tried very hard to be consistent in our parenting. I'm sure we haven't, but in all ways, but we've tried to be consistent with them. And yet they're all totally different in
Yeah.
terms of their personalities, their interests, their learning styles, and that's just who they are. And
Right.
so this for Evan, he's transgender, and this is just another thing that he knew about himself that we needed to learn how to support,
Right.
right? And it's I think that's hard for parents to accept. There's only so much you can do in terms of nurture to
Right.
shape a person.
Right.
And then the whole journey of parenting is like accepting your kid for who they are and loving them and supporting them and nurturing them into the best possible human being, with your own values and your own, these are the things that are important in our family, right? These are the traditions that are important to us, but accepting that they are their own people.
And they are master teachers. So, right, that's what
Yeah.
I think, that our kids are master teachers.
Yeah.
I learn more from the kids than anybody else.
And I think it gets hard for parents if the kids have intertwined there with their gender exploration, if they have mental illness, if they're experiencing anxiety, depression, self-harming behaviors,
Yeah.
or if a child comes out at an age where there is a lot of social in influence, right? Like, on social media or within their social group at school. Where I live, there's a lot of kids kind of exploring their gender, trying on different pronouns, trying on new names, trying on different sexual orientations. And that, I think that a lot of parents feel anxious about trusting. Like, my kid is, this week they say they're this and next week they say they're that. And that's true. Like, some kids are just trying it on and exploring. And I think for parents to learn how to be flexible, go with the
Yeah.
flow,
Yeah.
not overreact, hold space, and say, okay, like, you're trying this on, and it's very low risk, right?
That's what I tell them. There's
You want to
hardly any
use a
risk at
different name
all.
or a different pronoun,
Who
like,
cares?
see how it feels
Yeah.
out in the world,
Right?
right?
Who cares? Man,
I
it
mean, when we
doesn't.
start talking about hormones and other things that can be more permanent, then that's a different conversation. But if
Right.
they're just, they want to cut their hair, they want to wear different clothes, they want to put on makeup, like, it may be hard for you to understand, but it's pretty low risk,
It's very low
all in
risk.
all.
And I mean, I isn't gender worthy of exploration? I
Mm,
mean, the thing that I love is that I feel like we're moving toward a culture, whether some, and the more they resist it, the more we will persist. um,
yeah,
where gender exploration is something that is part of the developmental phase that kids go through
that's right.
in a way that's really healthy and fun and not harmful, right? Because it used to be the gender exploration of, okay, now I'm a girl and now I'm a boy. Because when I was a tomboy in sixth grade, all of a sudden, all my tomboy friends all of a sudden became girls overnight, right? It
Mm,
was like all of a sudden that's who they are. The boys
mhm.
line up who they are. And then us weirdos are in between going, oh my God, what do we do?
Yeah.
Like, oh no. Right? Now there's just a place for us where it's like, this is legit, right? I might land here in this middle and there's other people like me. So, I mean, I think that's a really healthy, normal, like developmental phase for kids to explore their gender.
Mm,
And I think that part of the violence and part of our stagnation of humans is years and years and years of suppressing that and trying to keep it down. Like,
yes.
right? It's like,
And
of
these
course,
rigid
people are
roles and
violent
these
when they're trying to just keep that
mm,
down, right? Having been on testosterone and knowing the power of it, I mean, I
mm,
just can't even imagine being 14 years old and having that virility rise up in me if I've got any sort of mental health or any sort of like anger issues, or I mean, I just can't even. Yeah. So especially,
yeah.
and then people are trying to tell me not to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
And I think,
it's
I mean, it's
weird.
all on a spectrum,
It
right?
is. It is.
And I interviewed a high school friend for this book whose child is non-binary. And she reminded me, she said, back when we were in high school, I hung out with and I grew up in Arkansas, right? And I hung out with the kind of alternative crowd. And I think when I was that age, I might have identified as non-binary.
Mhm.
I might identify now as non-binary or as pansexual, right?
Right.
But we didn't have that
We didn't
language.
have this
We didn't have that
language. Yeah.
terminology.
Yeah.
And so it was, you're either this or this,
Right. Well, I did
right?
identify as genderqueer, but nobody else in the world knew what that word meant. Literally nobody.
Yeah.
And as soon as I went full on testosterone, they had to put me in that man box so often
Right.
that it just, because they just didn't have a choice. It's like they
Yeah.
see what you see. So
And they're
yeah, it's
playing,
interesting.
kids these days are playing with language. They're
Oh yeah.
playing, they're inventing new pronouns. And it's hard
Yeah.
for us old people to keep up,
It
but
is. It is. But it's again, it's a worthy journey because why not? My
yeah.
one of the things that I make sure to tell people is where you start may not be where you end up. And you gotta let
Mm,
the more you push against it, the more, like just let it. The best thing we ever did with Ren was just to be like, okay, we'll follow your lead. And now Ren is non-binary, no hormones, and goes by they, she. And it's just not even a conversation anymore, really.
yeah.
Uh, and that's just by just not like I'm just letting them be where they're gonna be. I guess you don't have to
Yeah.
resist that. And
Someone
then
told me, oh, I'm sorry to interrupt.
I don't know, go ahead.
Well, someone told me, at some point you will not think about your child's gender every day.
Yeah,
When you're in the throes of this is all new and they're transitioning and they're figuring it out and you're figuring out it is like it's so present. And I said, but someday you won't think about it. And I'm at that place now with my
yeah,
own kiddo
yeah.
where I'm like, oh right, I forgot. You're
My
trans.
mom
So, I mean,
forgot.
he's
Yeah,
just a boy. Like
yeah,
he's so and he's in middle school and he's like discovering all the things about middle school, which is such a hard space to be in.
yeah.
But I forget about the trans
Part
identity part all the time. And he's
right.
not he's not doesn't want to be a poster child, doesn't want to fly a flag, he's not out at school.
Yeah,
So it's easy for me to just kind of like put it in the back of my mind.
sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm,
And good on. I'm glad he's feeling comfortable just being himself and being the
yeah,
young boy he is in the world. That's
me
pretty
too.
fantastic. So
Mm,
yeah, it's that's that's good stuff. And considering the other thing is that this book can do when we're educating cis het people is the power they have to influence and talk to other cis het people. And given that there's been over 200 anti-LGBTQ bills, most of them aimed at uh, trans youth in the last year, your book is very timely. And I apologize I haven't had a chance to read it all, but folks, this is like hot off the press. It's like I just got in the mail. So,
don't tell people you haven't read it because you wrote an endorsement.
oh no, no, I did read it. I mean, I read it, but I didn't read it,
You wrote an
because I
early
don't
version, read
read
an earlier
anything. But
version.
what I do is I skim through and I read a story, and that's why I was like, I know there's stuff in here that I haven't read. Um, I don't want to lie and say I've read it cover to cover because that wouldn't be me. There's very few books of my life I've ever read cover to cover.
But just so
That's the
people know,
coolest thing about this.
it's
It's
very
awesome
short.
cover to cover. It's very short. It's just like mine, where it's like, hey, you could read this, and it's 138 pages. So it's hardly anything at all. And it is a book like mine where you can go, okay, wait, I need some. Okay, good. Seriously, it happens sometimes that co-parents are not at the same mind at supporting their child's gender transition or how to handle certain aspects of their child's social transit. I mean, come on, it's like every page. And that's what I mean. It's like every page you can get some inspiration, you can get some, oh, okay, somebody gets me, right?
And I put at the end of each chapter, there's reflection questions.
Yes. Study
Um,
question. You could use it. I was noticing that because we have a new PFLAG group coming up in our town, and it'd be great for. I was just noticing that and thinking this is perfect for a study group.
yeah, it's good. I think it's useful for a group or just for you, a
Sure.
journal prompts or to have conversations with your partner. Um, and then at the end of the book, I put in some questions for faith communities too, because this is not a book directly for faith communities, but I know there are a lot of parents for whom their child's gender journey may put them in some tension with their faith community, or they may want to help educate their faith community about this. And, because I'm a pastor as well, um, supporting, resourcing both families and faith communities is important to me. So I think I hope that people will also, take the book to your pastor and say, let's have a book discussion on this, or let's talk about some ways that we can make our church more welcoming and affirming, because I feel like families are so critical in that support system. And a lot of people, a lot of the groups that are supporting these anti-trans bills are sadly Christians. And
Yes.
we just need more churches and other faith communities as well to say, no, this is part of how God made creation and how God made people. And I'm so grateful to Reverend Asher O'Callahan, who's a Lutheran pastor and a trans man, who let me use his poem in the beginning of the book about a new creation story for genderqueer people, because it's just it is in there. It's in the design of creation for there to be this kind of diversity, this kind of beauty. And I hope that faith communities can also find space.
Amen to that. That's something that's so powerful. And I mean, I'm so hopeful about that, Rachel. Even the Pope, right, recently came out and told, which it's very interesting to me, that told the Catholics to look to Saint Joseph, right, because Saint Joseph accepted Jesus as Jesus was. And
Mm.
so I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
that's brilliant. And
Right.
yes, and you're right. These bills are all backed by a lot of Christians who, speak the Bible out of one side of their mouth and hate out of the other. And so I appreciate you saying that. And I appreciate you coming from that perspective of being able to be a Christian and stand inside of that. One of the things I've talked about recently, I think is so important that your Dumbarton that you have done from way back in the day is be really loud about the fact that you're affirming, because it's one thing to like have everybody know quietly that you're affirming versus you're really putting your foot in it. Recently, our faith community, because we are a unity movement, and unity just doesn't say anything at all about it because I don't care. This is not a thing. But
Yeah.
at our faith community, they started hanging rainbow flags just to make sure everybody's very clear. And
Right.
so and it makes a huge difference because then people know, oh, they aren't going to be surprised, right, by who's
Yeah.
attending this congregation. So it's different than like on one side of your mouth doing one thing and the other. It's time for people to stop with the rainbow ring around their Facebook pages and really put their foot in it or not, because it's, yeah, you got to do it.
Well, and not to get too far into the weeds on this, but the Methodist Church is in the
I know,
process of splitting
splitting
over
over this, right?
human sexuality, and so I think in the future there's going to be Methodist churches that don't leave. The conservatives are preparing themselves to leave and launch their own denomination, but there will be Methodist churches that are in the affirming camp but don't really know
Right,
what it means to be affirming. Like,
right,
it's one thing to hang a rainbow flag outside, it's
right,
another thing to actually do the work
right, right.
and come to a theological and pastoral understanding of what it means to welcome people, and to create the resources, the liturgy, the physical space that welcomes all people. So I hope
Yeah.
churches will engage in that process.
I think it's coming. I'm affirming it. It's on its way. So I know it
Yeah.
is. Would you share with us the poem before we close?
Oh,
I'll close
yes.
with the poem.
Yes. I have to grab a copy of the book. Hold
Okay.
on. So this is a slightly edited version of this poem, but and Reverend O'Callahan said he may be creating a children's book out of this poem, which I think would
Nice.
just be so beautiful.
What a great name, Reverend O'Callahan.
Yes. So it's entitled "A New Creation Story for Trans and Non-Binary People," based on a poem by the Reverend Asher O'Callahan. In the beginning, God created day and night. But have you ever seen a sunset? Trans and non-binary people are kind of like sunsets. full of 100 shades of color you can't see in plain daylight or during the dark night. In the beginning, God created land and sea. But have you ever seen a beach? Trans and non-binary people are kind of like beaches, an oasis that is not quite like the ocean, nor quite like the land. In the beginning, God created birds of the air and fish of the sea. But have you ever seen a flying fish? Or a seagull? Or a puffin that swims and flies? Trans and non-binary people are kind of like those amazing creatures. We spend our time between the water and the land, creative combinations of characteristics that blows people's minds. In the beginning, God created male and female in God's own image. God created them. So in the same way, God created people with genders beyond male and female. In God's own image, God created them. God created people, cis, trans, non-binary, agender, and intersex, in between, outside of, and beyond, night and day, land and sea, fish and bird. All different sorts of people, all different sorts of relationships. God created them from love, and to be loved. God had created them all in God's own image, and God is still creating them.
That's Rachel Cornwell. Daring Adventures. Thank you, my friend. We'll make sure we have links to the book, right?
Yeah.
Anything else do you want us to, how can people find you? Can you leave us with that?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I have a Facebook page for the book, which will have links to both online and in-person book readings and events.
Great.
I would love for people to order the book from the publisher, ACTA Publications. It is available on Amazon, but I would love for people to
we'll put up a link to order the book through ACTA Publications.
That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Jay. It's
Thank
so
you, my
beautiful
friend.
to see you.
Beautiful to see you. I had read that poem, but man, it makes me cry when you read it. Like so different, when you read it versus when you take it in. Yeah. So thank you, my friend.
Well, I see you. I see the image of God that you're made in, and I love it.
Thanks for joining us, friends. Remember that to click subscribe, tell all your friends. We're the Gender Reveal Party Podcast. We're on Spotify, iTunes, everywhere you get your podcasts. And don't forget that we also have a Patreon link. So if you'd like to support the podcast and support these kind of stories, we appreciate your support. Thanks so much. Love you. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to the Gender Reveal Party Podcast. I hope you loved it. And if you did, would you take a second and go do all the things like subscribe, rate, review, tell all your friends. Apparently, if you do that, the podcast platforms are more likely to share it. And if you think these stories are important, please take 3 minutes to just go do that. I'd really appreciate it. Also, I'd love to connect with you on social. On Instagram and Facebook, I'm at the Gender Reveal Party, and on Twitter, I'm at Pryor J. It's a real joy and privilege to bring you this podcast. Come back soon. Love you, bye.